course that I had to take was asking me what my goals are. Like they were suggesting, do you want to go play with your grandkids? And I'm like, oh my goodness, I want to run the Boston Marathon one day. And so
Are you running a marathon? Oh, I could never run a marathon.
Sure about that? A marathon is like 42 kilometers, 26 miles. I don't understand those people.
That used to be me, but not anymore. Welcome to the Marathon Podcast. My name is Christian Warwick. Warwick runs on Instagram, YouTube. Thank you so much for tuning into the Marathon Podcast. I really appreciate that. And I haven't asked you guys for this in a very long time, actually. And I feel like it is fair to ask you to please just go in, give this podcast a review, follow the podcast wherever you are listening, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Those are kind of the only things that I need and want from you guys, because that will definitely help me grow the podcast. And I'm so motivated by performance, progress, growth. And those are the ways that I can see that. So if you want to motivate me to do more of this podcast, obviously, if you don't like it, then never mind. But if you do, please go subscribe, follow, and give this podcast a review. I would really appreciate that. And on Apple Podcast, if you want to leave a comment, that's great as well. In today's episode, we're having Carrie Bradshaw with us. And I'm so excited for you guys to hear this episode. I think that although most of us luckily are never going to face her problems, like having two hip replacements and still want to run a marathon, I still feel like she's a great example of someone who is facing something very difficult and still kind of just comes back and fights that thing that she's facing, and she's coming back in such a great and gracious way. So super excited for you guys to listen to this. I thought that it was very, very inspiring, and I just loved that conversation with her. And yeah, I'm sure you have someone that you know that can benefit from listening to this, whether or not it's hip replacements or other surgeries or other challenges that people are facing. Today, I don't really have that much to talk about before we dive into the conversation, so I'm just going to leave it at that. Enjoy this conversation with Carrie and enjoy your run if that's what you're doing. Okay, we have a world record holder with us today. Carrie, welcome to the Marathon Podcast.
hey, Christian, thank you so much for having me on.
Yeah, I was just telling you that I was just reading this fresh article before we jumped on this call, and your story is just amazing.
Well, thank you so much. Yeah, that makes me feel good.
Yeah, I guess we just have to dive into it, and like obviously before you tell us your story, I would love to know who you are, regardless of running. But who is Carrie?
Yeah, so my name is Carrie Bradshaw, just like, Sex in the City. I live in Houston, Texas. My husband and I have two kids. My husband and I actually lived in Australia for a few years before kids. I had run 10 marathons and probably 60 half marathons before I found out that I had something called congenital hip dysplasia, which basically means my hips never formed correctly at birth, and it caused bone-on-bone arthritis in both of my hips, which was extremely painful, obviously. That after seeing several surgeons, and going through PT and everything else I could do to avoid surgery, I ended up getting both of my hips replaced, 5 months apart, and now it's been about 2.5 years. No, we're going on 3 years in April, and, I just ran the Houston Marathon, and I ran the Boston Marathon last, April with my new hips, and we're still going strong.
Yeah, it's awesome, and I think that when you're telling the story here, it all sounds like, oh yeah, she had some hip replacements, and then she started running again, and she used to be a runner. But I know that there were definitely times during those hip replacements or the recovery process where you were also told maybe beforehand that you would never be able to run again. Can you just take us through maybe first, that feeling of learning that you had this in the first place, and then like as a runner, how did that make you feel?
Yeah. So when I right around the time I turned 40, and my hip pain became debilitating to the point where I remember one morning I was on a run and my left leg, that was the first hip that I had replaced. My left leg literally, I always describe it as it locked up. I couldn't move. I had to limp home. It felt like something was, the bones were grinding together. I thought maybe it was a stress fracture. I wasn't sure, but I knew something wasn't right. I was in a little bit of denial, but eventually I saw a hip surgeon, and he told me he diagnosed me with something called congenital hip dysplasia. I had no idea what that was. So he explained
No,
that
because
how my
you didn't know that you had this
no,
when no. Oh.
that's the thing. Yeah, no, I never knew I had something wrong with my. I played competitive soccer my whole life. I had run 10 marathons, like I said, the Boston Marathon. Um, I guess looking back, when people ask me, I always did have lower back pain, and I guess I had some aches and pains, in my hips sometimes, but I just kinda thought they were, part of the deal when you're a long distance runner. And looking back, that back pain was probably associated with my defective hips, because my back was sort of having to compensate because my hips were so, never formed correctly and they weren't able to support my body. So yeah, I was diagnosed with congenital hip dysplasia with surgeon number 1. He recommended PT. I did everything I could probably for the next year, to avoid surgery. I did PT, I did PRP, which is platelet-rich plasma. I took anti-inflammatories, you name it. During the course of trying everything, I saw about 6 or 7 surgeons, and the consensus was that, they told me once if I get my hips replaced, I wouldn't be able to run again. So I was kind of in this, lose-lose situation where it was depressing. Running was off the
Yeah,
table,
because
obviously.
sorry to interrupt you there. Can you just explain or describe that feeling of hearing those words?
Well, when they said the word hip replacement, that felt like a death sentence for a runner. And I know that's not life or death, but for a runner, if you hear that you need a hip replacement, yeah, it felt like a death sentence, like running's over. And then so I felt in shock. I went through the whole grieving process, um, during, I guess, those 3 years from that point until after, I recovered. Yeah, I was in denial, but also it was so, upsetting and depressing. I had has been a huge part of my life. All of us, we have, it it was what kept me going. It made me feel like my best self, and I was a better mom because of it, and I loved chasing my big goals, and to have that taken away p for that period of time and then potentially forever was devastating, just because it was such a huge part of my soul. So,
Yeah.
yes, I was desperate to find anything that could maybe keep me from getting my hips replaced and heal what was wrong. I was looking for a miracle. And
Hmm.
I was in denial. I was hoping that I could find anything to get me back to running again and to help me avoid hip replacement surgeries. Because and then, like I said, most doctors said you'll never run again with hip replacement surgeries. So it was a lose-lose situation in my mind because I was like, well, I'm in pain. I can't even walk sometimes, without pain and, go play with my kids the way I want to. I really want to run again. You're saying if I go through these major surgeries and get my hips replaced and then have the long recoveries, I still can't look forward to running again? Like this sucks.
Yeah.
Right? And, fast forward, I ended up meeting my miracle surgeon, Doctor Stocks, and he was the only one who felt confident enough to say, Carrie, I can't make you any promises, but I think you can get back." And he said
Hmm.
he believed that the technology these days with the prosthetic joints, is so good that he thought that I had a good chance of getting back to running, and more specifically, running marathons and getting back to the Boston Marathon, which was my dream. So once I heard that, it gave me that hope that I needed. And I've said it before, he's the hero in the whole story, but that he believed in me before I believed in myself. And I really needed that. to pursue my goals and to at least attempt to start training running long distance again.
It makes me happy, sad, and a little upset all at once when you're saying this. One, and I feel like we see this in some movies where it's like based on a true story, and you hear about like, oh, we're trying a second option and a third option, like trying to find surgeons or doctors who will tell you that we can do something, regardless of it being like a hip replacement, but it could be anything. But it's so sad to hear that you had to go through so many doctors or opinions before you actually uh, got to like see this doctor who actually believed in and was able to help you out.
Right. Yeah, it was frustrating. And my husband remembers me calling him at work. Some days it would just hit me pretty hard. Um, like I said, I was in denial. I was going through all the stages of grief. I was trying to use the Peloton to bike, but that's not really the same thing. I had lost just this huge part of my soul, which made me feel alive. And it became like it felt like I was just existing and just getting used, almost just trying to get used to the idea that this part of me was gone. So it I was just kind of a shell of myself. And then when I
Hmm.
found Dr. Stocks and he gave me that hope, I was still scared. And honestly, I didn't know if I was going to go through with my first hip replacement because it sounded so scary. And I was, scared to do it at such a young age. Um, but luckily I did, and it all worked out. And honestly, I feel like I am this second chapter of my running story is even better than the first.
Yeah. Because let's backtrack to that first chapter, I guess,
Mm-hmm.
before we continue. Because we haven't really touched on how you were running, how much you were prioritizing it, and how big part of a life or of your life running was before the surgeries or before this run when you got that pain. I know that you were running, and then was it your husband who helped you out a little bit to get like more serious with your running before you even got these
Ye
issues?
Yeah, so, like I said, I played soccer growing up. I ran, I ran my first marathon in college with my mom. I never trained. I wore the wrong shoes. I wore soccer shorts and a big t-shirt. I mean, my little Sony headphones, and I didn't train. I didn't even no speed work. I just ran. And that I never really trained properly or pushed myself. So when I met after I, met my husband and we would run races, I would just do it for fun. He was eventually he was like, "Why don't you like try?" Why don't you like really train for it? And I remember running a 10K with him, and I was like, well, let's just see if I can beat 50 minutes in a 10K. And I did. And that was sort of the catalyst. I got my competitive edge back, like from when I was a kid playing
Hmm.
soccer. And I eventually set the goal. I'm like, you know what? I'm going to qualify for the Boston Marathon. That's what I want to do. And he was like, whoa, slow down. Like, he was like, you have a lot of time to shave off your marathon. I think it was like over half an hour to get a Boston qualifying time, and I'm like, "No, no, when I go all in, I'm all in." So yeah, I ended up qualifying for Boston a couple years later in 2014 at the Houston Marathon for the first time, and ran Boston in 2015. And in between those 2 races, I ran, half marathons. I ran the Chicago Marathon. Eventually, after Boston, I got my time down to a 3:09. I got very competitive with myself.
Yeah.
Compared to where I used to be, where I would just run for fun, didn't have a Garmin, and that's fine too. But
Hmm.
I loved getting my competitive edge back that I had when I was a soccer player.
Yeah. Wow. And your husband, did he have any experience with running since he encouraged you that way, or was it just that he saw you were having fun?
Well, yeah, he started getting into like half marathons and races with me. I would sign him and me, both of us up in Australia, and we even ran half marathons, like, in other countries when we lived abroad, in Vietnam, in Cape Town, all over Australia and New Zealand. So I would bring him along with me, and yeah, we would run them together. He was faster than me, but then it eventually got to a point when we moved back, where I would start beating him and he was having to keep up with me, so that was kinda fun. But yeah, no, he would
How
run
did
with
he
me.
like that?
I think he handled it pretty well. I think it was good
Yeah.
because it gave him motivation to keep training. But yeah, it was fun.
Good.
We were about the same level at the half marathon. Yeah, it was fun. It was fun because before, he used to finish the race way before me and then come back and find me. And I eventually made myself, faster and got up to the same speed as him. So yeah, that was pretty cool. He actually hurt his knee, so he can't run anymore. So we don't get to
Mm,
share the actual races, the running part together. But he and the kids come out to cheer for me at my big races now.
yeah. So at that point, like in uh, when you were 40 and you were diagnosed, you it sounded like you were kind of training for the marathon still. You had a 309 marathon. Where were you at in your like with your ambitions and goals at the time?
So my 309 was actually before I had my first child. I had my son Theo in 2016. My 309 was before I got pregnant, right before I got pregnant with him. I made it a goal after I had Theo, that I wanted to qualify for Boston again and, keep running. And I did. 9 months after I had Theo, I qualified for Boston for 2018. So I was supposed to go back. I was registered. And then, surprise, on Christmas Eve, I found out I was pregnant with my daughter, and so I ended up not going, and, it worked out because that was the year it was super bad weather in
Yeah. Yeah.
2018.
I don't think you
So
missed out on a lot of
no, exactly, I was kind
good
of
running there.
yes, and at that point too, I took it for granted. I thought, "Well, I'll be back in another year or 2." That was
Mhm.
2018, and
Yeah.
that was before they had the deferral option for pregnancy.
Mhm.
So I didn't have an
Mhm.
option to defer. So I thought, well, after I have Poppy, that's my second child, I'll just start training again and I'll qualify. So it wasn't until about 2019 that the hip pain started. I never ran a marathon after that. The last marathon I ran was that one in 2017 that where I qualified for Boston for 2018. I never made it
Yeah.
to Boston. So between 2017 and 2025, I had not run a marathon because
No.
that kids, COVID, hips.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
yeah, it had been what, 8 years?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I
And
wasn't at the 309 shape then. I was just because after I had my daughter, I was starting to have the pain. It wasn't as
yeah.
severe as when I told you about how my leg locked up, but and then COVID hit. So yeah,
Mhm.
perfect storm.
Yeah, yeah, perfect storm. But then at the point where you were diagnosed, you were kind of building yourself back up again then, I guess, to kind of prepare for uh doing more marathons after having kids and giving birth. Is that right?
Right, so I had already had both of my kids and I was running, and I think I was doing training for a half marathon. It wasn't a full marathon yet, but that was
Yeah.
obviously on the agenda. But I remember that summer when I would run, I would have this really bad pinching pain in like the front of my leg. And a doctor and somebody else had just kind of chalked it up to, just normal aches and pains from running. But looking back,
Yeah.
it was my hip. And that just
Yeah.
progressively got worse where sometimes I'd be limping around after I would go for like a 6-mile run.
Mhm.
But I just kind of, dealt with it. I didn't think it was serious until it got to the point where it just like shut my whole leg down.
But is there like if the doctors took that more seriously the first time when you approached them, could that have changed things for you at all? Or what was this like this would have happened regardless and you would have had to do the hip replacements regardless of the
Right.
process?
Okay, that's a good question. So with congenital hip dysplasia, most of the time, from what I understand and what I've read, most people don't know they have it until later in adolescence or as young adults. And if you don't get diagnosed, if they don't catch it when you're a baby, eventually you are going to have your hips fixed. There's a more invasive procedure for younger, like for teenagers and people maybe in their 20s who don't have arthritis yet. But for someone like me, I had, let me step back a second. Dysplasia is the number one cause of early arthritis in young adults because
So it's fusing, your joints are kind of fusing and
right.
that's obviously reversible.
So by the time I was having that pain, unfortunately, and even when I was pregnant, I had a lot of pain, but I chalked it up to something called round ligament pain. The
Yeah.
arthritis had already started. So, if I before because the arthritis had already started, they couldn't do this other procedure that younger people tend to go through called a
Mhm.
PAO, where they kind of reconstruct your pelvis and hips. The only option is a hip replacement because of the
Yeah.
arthritis. So the arthritis was so bad at that point that I would have found out eventually. Now, Do I regret would I think about this sometimes. If I would have found out as a child that I had hip dysplasia and that I needed to be careful and maybe not play soccer or run marathons, I don't know that I would have wanted that. I think the
No.
way it worked out for the best because I think that it would have held me back. And
Yeah.
now that I've been through it, I mean, it wasn't fun when I was going through it. Now I love that I get to be a messenger to other young people or older people who are going through this, that their life isn't over and that they can potentially get back, to what makes them happy and what makes them feel alive.
Yeah. No, I love hearing that, and that, like, that way of looking at it. I think it's great, and it does make sense too, right? Because then you were able to have a normal childhood, do the things that
Exactly.
you didn't feel like anything was wrong. You didn't have to be cautious. Your parents didn't have to worry about that when you were a kid. All of those things. I think it does make sense. And then especially now seeing where you are at today, like you said, you can be an advocate for
Right.
this instead of like being one of those examples where it didn't work out or that you're unhappy. You're kind of showing the opposite.
Right. And one other thing that I just remembered, when I went to one of, I think it was the third or fourth surgeon I saw in Houston, he told me, he said, Carrie, most people would have been, he was looking at my imaging. He's like, most people would have been in the ER 10 years ago with your hips.
Yeah.
But because we're runners and we're strong and I was able to sort of maybe, I don't know if I don't, maybe it's our pain tolerance too as runners, but I think I was, because of the running and the strength training, I was able to protect my hips or, um, like I said, my back compensated, but I was able to go longer before I hit the point of no return. So I thought
Yeah.
that was interesting, that he said that about, I think there's something to be said, if I d because a lot of people wanted to say, "Well, it's because you ran marathons, it got so bad," and no, it's not. I was born people like to say that who aren't runners. No, it has nothing to do with running. In fact, I think being strong gave me an extra 10 years. But,
Yeah. Hmm.
if I would have found out that I had this condition and that would lead to arthritis and that I would need hip replacements, I can't imagine back like 20 years ago before the technology changed that doctors would have said, "No marathons, no half marathons, like, you do not wanna risk it with your hips,"
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
I'm really glad
Yeah.
I'm really glad it didn't come to that.
Yeah, no, I totally see what you mean there. And I think that, like, to the listeners who don't really are not that familiar with arthritis, and I think we hear about it, but you might not really know that when that starts. And even if you have like surgeries, whatever, like it's still like fused, so that you can't really change that. But that makes me curious, and I don't know if you gotten this question before, but since you had hip replacements, does that mean that you don't have any arthritis in that area at all now, or do you still have to deal with any of the arthritis in, like, the the areas around your hips at all?
Well, as far as I know, it's all gone.
Wow.
It's gone.
I
Yeah,
mean,
I don't know. Yeah.
I know, I'm not sure what is better or worse to have arthritis and then having the hip replacement. Like, you're the one who has it, so you know the answer to that. But like, because my next question was obviously in terms of that pain that you were talking about, that was also immense. Like, it's really hard to deal with just having pain every day. What is that
Mhm.
like now after the hip replacement? Is it like pain free, or do you still
I
have a
mean,
lot of pain?
so much better. Like, I feel like I joke around that I feel like a little 10-year-old running around in the soccer field now, no pain. But I'm not completely pain free. Not to get into the weeds too much, but my second hip replacement was different. The recovery was different from the first one. I had some tendonitis. The tendon, they say, quote unquote, got pissed off from the surgery, which is
Yeah.
very common. And so I had a lot of tendonitis that was really painful with after my second hip replacement. I can manage it now. The pain is nothing like what I went through before the surgeries. But every now and then it gets a little tight and pinches, and luckily with my PT has shown me some gentle stretches, and I think the most important thing is that I stick with my PT and keep my body strong. Um
Yeah. A-
to
And
kind of
the
hold
way
off.
you describe this, it sounds like for almost every runner will face this, right? Like you have
Yeah,
niggles, pain here and there,
right.
and then you just have to manage it with
Yes.
strength training and other things.
Exactly. Yeah, and it's just it lets me know it's a little bit cranky. It lets me know it's there, but it's not debilitating at all.
Yeah.
I can manage it. So yeah, the pain is nothing like it was when when it was debilitating and I couldn't even walk some days.
Hmm.
But I don't want to say I'm completely pain free because I don't want if somebody does get a hip replacement, you never know. Everybody's recovery is different. I don't want them to be disappointed if they do have the tendonitis like I have or something else. But for the most
Yeah.
part, yeah, game changer. Like 180.
Yeah. No, it's so cool to hear, and it's also it I guess it gives hope to a lot of us
Mhm.
regardless of like having this or not. It's just also modern medicine, right? It's great. And I want us to talk more about, the dealing with the pain, and because I also have some questions on how you learn to deal with the pain that you have as a consequence of that compared to like niggles or injuries that are unrelated to that. But before we do, I would just love to hear a bit more about that process of having the surgeries and the mental battle that I'm sure you also faced at the time, because you I'm sure like when you had that first hip replacement, you're going in there and was it the stocks? Is that
Mhm.
what it is?
Doctor
Yeah.
Stocks, yeah.
Dr. Stocks. So Dr. Stocks told you that uh, he thought that it would be fine, but he can't make any promises. So heading into that first surgery, you probably have a lot of hope, but you're facing the unknown, right?
Yeah.
And so like with that surgery, going into it and also just after, can you say something about where you were at mentally at that point and what kind of thoughts you had going through your head?
I feel like this is like a therapy session. I'm going back and I'm like
I'm
remembering.
sorry if
No,
I'm digging too much
no,
here.
no,
I
it's
hope it's
fine.
okay.
It's kind of therapeutic to go back because I can remember where I was at certain points and how I felt. Uh, so let me back up a little bit. First of all, Dr. Stocks is my hero. He is the hero, and I'll tell you more about. He still continues to support me, which we'll get to. Um, so when I finally met with him, and he told me he didn't have a problem with me trying to run, and I'm like, "But I don't just wanna go run around the block. I wanna run, like, marathons." And he was like, "Okay."
Mhm.
Like, no, and I made him I was like, "Wait a second. Why are these other surgeons who are reputable telling me it's over?" And I made him explain it to me, why was his opinion different? Uh, she did, but he told me at that appointment, it was in June or July of 22. And he's like, "Carrie, why don't you just book a surgery date?" I was not ready at this point. "Why don't you just book a surgery date this fall or winter and get one on the books?" I book up fast. If it comes to, that date and you're not ready yet, cancel it. No big deal. Not gonna they're not he's not gonna penalize me. But just have it
Mhm.
there. So I booked it and I'm like, this is crazy. I'm supposed to get this hip replacement, but I didn't actually think I was gonna go through with it. Uh so Halloween, so fast forward, Halloween, I'm still, having I start like I said, I was sort of existing. I was a shell of myself, just sort of managing life in the pain. But the breaking point, I guess, my aha moment was on Halloween night, so October 31st, 2022. My surgery that I didn't think I was going to get done was on November 7th, 1 week later. We went trick or treating, my husband and my kids and me, and I couldn't walk around the block to go trick or treating. I think I made it about 5 minutes, and my left leg did that locking up feeling I told you about, and I was limping around with my 6-year-old and 4-year-old. I eventually had to call it quits and go back home alone, walk back home alone, and it's a blessing that that moment happened. That was the moment that just made it clear what my answer was. At that moment, I was like, "All right, I'm getting the hip replacement next week." I mean, take running off the table. I can't even live my life. I'm like, I've been in denial.
Yeah.
I've been just sort of trying to work around it and do everything I can to avoid hip surgery. But why? I can't even do simple things like walk around the block to go trick or treating with my kids. I can't even I limp after I would walk my son to kindergarten, and I remember on the way I could make it there to the door, but after I would drop him off, when I'd walk back to my car, I would limp. And it just became a I just got used to it. And it would wait the pain
Yeah.
would wake me up at night. Anyway, so on Halloween, that was like my answer from God. All right, I was at peace about it. I'm doing the surgery. So, a week later, I had the surgery, but I will tell you something kind of funny. Before I had surgery, I had to do pre-op, and they make their patients, the hospital makes their joint replacement patients take a course online to
Mm.
kind of learn about the procedure and what the restrictions are in the recovery. And in the course, you have to, there's like a test and everything in the course. They're like, okay, so you need to write down your goals. After, we need your goals are super important. Do you want to get on the floor and play with your grandchildren? Do you want to garden outside? Do you want to go for a family walk? Basically, do you want to play with your grandchildren? That way, I remember them specifically saying that in gardening, and I was just like, oh my god, I want to run the Boston Marathon. I was like, "I
That's
don't know,
amazing.
this is crazy," and everybody in the waiting room also when I was going through pre-op, this was separate from the test that I had to take or the course. They were, my grandparents' age. They had canes, and here I am. I just did not feel like I belonged as much as I trusted Doctor Stocks,
Hmm.
and I did have a little bit of hope from him. I still was so scared, and I felt, very concerned about what the future was going to look like and if I would really have a life that I enjoyed living, pain free. I was in the
Yeah.
waiting room during my pre op, leading up to that first hip replacement, which I was still terrified about, but I had come to peace with because all of these 60, 70, 80-year-old people with canes and I can't remember if somebody had a walker. Probably they were in the room with me. I was one of them. And like I said, the course that I had to take was asking me what my goals are. Like they were suggesting, do you want to go play with your grandkids? And I'm like, oh my goodness, I want to run the Boston Marathon one day. And so it was just, I just felt out of place, right? So that's just kind of funny, looking back on that. But ultimately, yeah, I was ready and I felt like I had exhausted every option trying to avoid surgery. And I was finally at peace going into this first surgery. I trusted my doctor too, but I still was terrified because I had no idea what to expect. And I also had 2 little kids at home to still take care
Hmm.
of.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Mm.
So then heading into this surgery and having these ambitions of doing the Boston Marathon, not just playing with your grandkids or
Right.
gardening, uh, were you very nervous heading into that?
I remember I didn't really tell many people. I don't think I've said this before. I felt a little embarrassed. I don't
Hmm.
think I've ever not that I'm embarrassed to say that, but I don't think I'm processing my trying to remember my feelings and I'm processing them out loud with you, but I remember feeling a little bit ashamed and embarrassed that as a young mom, I was going through this hip replacement surgery that no one else that I who I knew of has gone through, and it just seems like, for lack of a better word, a grandparent surgery, or something that old
Yeah.
people get. And I say
Yeah.
old, I don't want to
Hmm.
offend anyone, like, a 70-year-old. I was a little bit embarrassed and I didn't wanna have to explain the reasoning why because I remember some people, I'm sure you could understand, some people who are not runners loved to, tell people it's or me that it was because I ran marathons and blame it on the
Exactly.
running
Yeah.
day. Marathons are so bad for you, and I just didn't have the energy, or the confidence at that point to, explain myself, and I honestly, it was all, like I said, uncharted territory. So I was scared, I was a little bit embarrassed, I didn't tell many people, going into it, but also, at the same time, I felt peace. Um, and I told my husband, my mom flew down for a week, and I didn't really have much time to think about it. I followed all the instructions getting ready for surgery, I had my walker ready, we had a plan for the kids getting to and from school, and I just sorta went with it.
Yeah. Okay. So then you had your first replacement,
Right.
and I was reading that you thought you could wait a little bit longer for that second hip replacement, but it kind of followed just a few months
Right.
later, right?
Right. So my hip dysplasia was in both hips, but the left hip, my first hip, was really bad. My doctor and I thought maybe I had a few years, 5 years, give or take, maybe 10. until I would need the other one done. But during the recovery for my left hip, I guess my right hip started crying out for help because it was having to pick up the slack, and it
Yeah.
started deteriorating a lot faster than what we had planned for. So I remember in January or February, the pain was it wasn't as severe as the pain on the other hip was, but I knew where I was headed, and I was having such a good recovery at this time with my first hip. I had already gotten to the other side. I was starting to walk, jog. I was getting, I wasn't using a walker anymore, and I saw how successful that surgery was, and I thought, I talked to my doctor. We did the imaging, and could I have waited another year to get the second one done? Yeah, but at that point, I was like, what's the point? I'm not doing what I did where I sat around for a year in denial and just desperate to find anything to avoid surgery. Like, we've already done the first one. Let's just knock it out. I mean,
Hmm.
this isn't fun. Um, but yeah, he agreed. We talked about my goals and he's like, I support you. So we went, and it was pretty bad, but it wasn't as bad as the other one. So we set that surgery up in April, which was less than 5 months after my first one.
And
And
where were you at with the recovery or rehab of the first hip then?
I had gotten to, I think, 3 months out, maybe 3.5 months out, because I was starting to walk, jog a little bit. I was feeling
Okay,
really
so
good
you
on
you
that
were
hip.
doing well on the
Yes,
recovery
very
on the
well,
first replacement or
which
hip.
made
Yeah.
me more proactive to just get it done.
Yeah, got
And I
it.
knew
So
my
then you
goals.
kind of had a like semi-functional hip on your first. Was it your left that was the worst? So the one
Mhm.
that you did first. So your
Yes.
left hip started to serve some kind of function or have
Right.
functionality to a certain degree so that it wasn't that big of a risk. It was not like you were had to be in a wheelchair for the whole
Right.
time when doing the other one or
Right. Well, you're talking about when I recovered, I had a walker for a walker and a cane
y-
for a while. But aside from the
yes.
first 6 to 8 weeks, which was tough, I was on the other side at 3 to 4 months, and I was
Mhm.
making such good progress where it was like, why am I just going to put off the inevitable? Like, let's knock it
Yeah.
out. But I will
Yeah.
say one of the only negative thing that I wish I would have known if I wish I would have known that I was going to need the second one done so soon, because I would have timed them in the same calendar year, like maybe 2 or
Yeah.
3 months apart so that it would be buy one, get one free with insurance, because I had
Mhm.
already paid our max out of pocket, which was a lot of money,
Yeah,
deductible
right.
out of pocket, and so then the calendar year started over 2 months later, and so we had to start all over and meet it again for the second
Mhm.
one. But, I got my life back. I felt like I'm so glad I got it behind me,
Yeah.
and I didn't have to worry about when that one was going to, give out.
Mhm. Okay, so then we or you have both
Mhm,
surgeries behind you. You've already started to recover on your left hip.
mhm.
You did say that there were some more complications with the
Yeah.
right hip, or like, but you were still able to start recovering, obviously, based on where you are today.
Yes.
And I know that you were and that honestly surprised me a little bit when I read that you said that I'm not going to rush this because even based on like following you on social media or talking to you before we had this chat, I feel like you are the kind of person who could also be like, oh, I really want to run. I really want to get there quickly so that you get impatient. I could be totally off here, but I was impressed when read that you said that you were not going to rush it. You were going to be smart about it.
Well, yes, you're right on the fact that I'm like, "I can't wait, I wanna do this," but I had certain restrictions.
Yeah.
My doctor, the first 6 weeks are crucial. I had a method called the posterior method, which is the recovery is a little longer compared to the other method. There were restrictions. I couldn't sit in certain angles, I couldn't move my leg, had to lay down when I slept because you're at risk of your hip coming out of socket in those first 6 weeks,
Hmm.
and I couldn't walk for 8. But then I knew that I needed to make it to the 6-week appointment and then to the 12-week or the 3-month appointment. And after he took X-rays at each of these appointments to make sure everything was healing. But he had told me kind of, the check-in points and what he recommended I do or not do, what restrictions were being lifted. And I knew after 3 months, I could start walking more and maybe doing a little bit of jogging and definitely PT and strength training. And the 6-month mark was the big appointment. I knew that if I played it smart and made it to the 6th. That's where I had to be patient. I was following his
Yeah.
timeline because I didn't want to risk it. I wanted to make it to that 6 point mark. That's, I'm sorry, that 6 month mark, where I was cleared to begin training again. The reason
Which would
why,
be like October, November of
exactly.
2023. Yeah.
Right. And I wanted to make it there, even though I wasn't doing anything super intense. I was walking a lot and maybe a little bit of jogging and strength training. But the reason why the 6 month mark is so important, and I've seen people who are, I'll get to that in a minute. But the reason why the 6 month mark is so important and you don't want to rush things is because the stem, like the metal titanium stem that they plant into your leg, it has to fuse to the bone and it takes 6
Right.
months. So, if you try to rush it too soon, which some people do, it's just not worth
Mhm.
it to me. You compromise that fusing of the implant to the bone, and I was in it for the long game. So, I didn't wanna compromise the healing at all. I just knew that, I could do other things. I just, like I said, walking and strength training, but I didn't want to set myself up, uh, to possibly need some sort of revision or something else done if I didn't let it fully heal. It wasn't worth it to me.
Mm.
But once
Mhm.
I got cleared at 6 months, it wasn't like I just started running 10Ks. Like, I had to start from walking, running, starting from, ground zero. And I was
Yeah.
smart about it because my gait had changed and my whole body was adjusting to these new siblings in the house, And so with my PT's help, I had a plan, but I, built up very gradually. Because like I said, everything was getting used to it. I remember my shins were so sore, my feet, all of my
Mhm.
muscles, because like I said, my gait had changed. So while I am ambitious and I'm impatient, and like exactly what you said, and I have these goals I want to go after, I knew that there was a reason why it's important to be patient with the recovery process. And unfortunately, I do hear from people on my Instagram who tell me that they're already running sooner than that, those 6 months, or doing more than what's recommended because they feel okay to do it. And it just makes me a little bit nervous. And I'm like, remember, play the long game. That's when you got to be
Yeah.
patient, you know? So,
Exactly. Yeah.
yeah.
And
That's,
for all of us here now listening to kind of understand this, because I feel like it's easy to hear, oh, I had a hip replacement, and then it's still hard to understand. You were talking about the stem going down like into the bone and it needs to fuse. Is this like a 3D print kind of thing? How does this work? Like, what does that new hip look like? Can you
yeah.
explain that or describe that in a way that it's easier for us to understand what has actually been done?
Sure, I'll do the best that I can with what I know, but I'm not a doctor. Actually, my hip company, Johnson and Johnson, made. I have a shirt on right now. This is Johnson and Johnson. They made my hips.
Nice.
Their
Hmm.
department. It's actually called the Pew Synthesis. Um, so, like I said, the technology has gotten really good. The stem. We should show a picture. They basically, okay. From what I understand and what I've seen, they saw in the surgery. They saw your femur off. They with a
Hmm.
saw, they cut your femur off, and they stick that stem, that metal, like, just it looks like a long metal stem into your femur, where that's what has to fuse, to the bone. Um, and then they clean out your hip and put a new socket and a ball in there. And
Wow.
the ball is ceramic, I believe. Yeah. Anyway, so it's this stem with a ball on the end of it that is in this, like, plastic how do you say it? It's polyethylene, is that the right word? Some special plastic. I probably got that word wrong.
Hmm.
You might wanna cut that
Oh,
part out.
no, you're good. I'm sure people will understand. I'm not even a native English speaker, so
Okay.
I don't know the word, but I'm
Yeah,
sure
so
it's
it's a
fine.
stem,
We yeah. No,
and
it's
then the
it's great.
ball.
I think that, yeah, then I think we're getting like a better picture of it, and it also says something about how invasive that
Yeah, there you
surgery
go.
is,
We don't need
right?
to get into
Like
details. It was a titanium hip. Yeah, the stem, they had to, like my husband and I joked around. They literally sawed my femur off. It felt like my leg had got
crazy.
eaten by a shark. And they have to, in the surgery, I heard, they have to, push your hip out of socket to do
Hmm.
these, which I was asleep, but apparently it's pretty
Yeah.
painful. Somebody told me, and I don't
Yeah.
know if this is true, but somebody told me some surgeons have to get a running start to go boom and run into the hip to get. And I'm like, I don't know. That's I don't think Dr. Stocks did that, but somebody was telling me that they have to because it's kind of hard to get the hip out of socket. But anyway,
Yeah.
yeah, it's an
Okay.
invasive surgery,
Yeah.
and there's a stem and a ball and a fake hip in me.
Well, it's insane that that's even possible to do. And then I guess like you're showing that the impossible is possible with everything that you've done after that. So we're getting closer to the end of 2023, right? And then at some point here, like I'm sure you are starting to run a little bit more, you're getting back into it. And then at some point you also get the opportunity to run the Boston Marathon like a year and a half after this, right?
Mhm,
Which was in 2025. So will you kind of take us through that
mhm,
between the surgery and
right.
getting that offer? Because I know that you were also like not sure if whether or not to say yes to that
Yes.
opportunity when that showed up.
Yes. Okay, so back to, the 6-month mark where I had my big checkup on my second hip to get cleared to begin training. And training is a loose word, like we talked about. I'm starting from ground zero. I started running, I started eventually running for 30 minutes. I built up to 10Ks and I made it my goal that following January 2024 to run the Houston Half Marathon. And I
Hmm.
did it. That was a huge, that was a huge, milestone for me that I ran it wasn't my fastest, but I did it and I felt great. Uh,
Oh,
and
and you did feel great during that. Like that
yeah,
was manageable for you.
right.
Like
Pain,
sure
nope.
hard, but
Yes,
still.
strong. Yes, strong, felt great. I mean, I wasn't fit, like I compared to where I used to be, but at that point I didn't care. It wasn't about time at this point. And really it
So
hasn't
that
been the
is
whole time.
just 3 months then after your 6 month mark, or 3 to 4 months.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
And from the past, it wasn't like I was running a PR. I just knew if I can get up to a 10-mile run, I can run the half marathon. We know our
Mhm.
bodies from the past.
But
It wasn't like it was going to be a super fast time.
but I think this is also like something that I've said that this on the podcast before, that just the fact that you're able to run
Right.
13 miles
Right. It was huge.
after that, like it doesn't matter what the time is. And I feel like this is the same for everyone, like
Right.
anyone running a marathon or a half marathon. It's a like a victory just to finish any race
Exactly.
like that. And then even
Exactly.
more so doing that. I'm sure it must have been such a big victory for you at the time.
Oh, it was huge. I had a lot of support, friends and family came out. It was like pure joy. I was out there. I was back on the playing field again after I had been sidelined for so long. It was awesome. It was so fun just to be out with all that energy again. I loved the Houston Marathon. It was so fun. And then after I ran that race, I knew I was like, all right, I'm getting back. I'm back. I mean, I said, I can move, I can run again. Let's see what, I wasn't going to be crazy and sign up for a marathon yet, but I started running more races and half marathons. I did a couple more. Uh, and then fast forward to that spring in April, the hip company that I mentioned, Johnson and Johnson, they had heard about my story because it had been in the press a little bit
Hmm.
and they invited me to give a speech at their national sales meeting for
Cool.
orthopedics. And they happened to be about an hour away from here in the Woodlands, 45 minutes to an hour. So I gave like this 12-minute TED talk on stage. I joked, so I ended up giving a speech to everybody about my story. It was great. I got to meet all the people who, work with the surgeons and I got to show them where that what they do in their day to day helps people like me. And
Exactly.
but I actually told them during that speech when I went up there because it was like 500 people or something wild and I was nervous and I said, um when they asked me to give this speech, um, and then I was like, "Oh, hell no. I'd rather get a 3rd hip replacement than go give a speech to 500 people on a stage," but, here we are. But I was joking
Yeah.
with them that, like, the fear of giving that speech seemed, harder than getting another surgery, but, yeah, I did so I gave the speech and then connected with the team, they're great. They actually just recently came down to the Houston Marathon to cheer for me. Ended up building these relationships. They were so supportive of me, and somebody at the from Johnson and Johnson at the national sales meeting is a volunteer for the BAA in Boston, and
Right.
he was given a golden, like a golden bib that he
Hmm.
could give to somebody, And so he approached me after my speech and asked me if I wanted it. And I'm like, "You mean," because it was in April. I'm like, "You mean next week?" And he's like, "No, no, for 2025." And I'm like, "Okay, good." I was like, "Ah." So when he asked me, I'm like, "I don't know. I feel like I really want to earn it, get there back on. I want to get there on my own and get my qualifying time." And at first I said no. And then my husband, Ben, was like, "What are you doing? Yes, yes, you want it." And I was like, "I don't." And
Yeah.
anyway, I thought about it, and he reached out to me again and was like, "Do you want it or not?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'll take it." I felt like it was happening for a reason and this opportunity was presenting itself, and that I would be foolish not to jump on that opportunity. So I took the golden bib, I was very grateful, and I had about a year then, less than a year to train to build my mileage up, and that's when Meb Keflewski
Yeah.
comes into my
Hmm.
life.
Yeah, because I was gonna ask you about that. It's funny that your 309 was from the year after Meb won Boston Marathon, right? Because you ran that in 2015 and he did it in 2014, right?
Yes, 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 yes,
Yes.
yes.
And so you are yeah, can you just describe or tell us how you got in touch with him, how that all kind of panned out in terms of him coaching you for the Boston Marathon in 2025?
Okay, so yeah, I guess it was early summer. I knew I was going to supposedly get this golden bib. I didn't have it in my hands, but it sounded legit from what they told me. And I had heard on a podcast that Meb was on that he does coach a handful of runners. And so I'm like, "That's awesome." Like, how cool would it be for Meb to be my coach? Like, he's a legend to all of us. He's just an awesome guy all around. And so I did a little research, and I found out where if I found somebody that I could email, and I emailed, inquiring about coaching with him. And I think I had to fill out like an application or answer some questions, and there was an interview process. And yeah, long story short, I guess he wasn't scared off by me, and he liked me, and I was able to work. He chose me, and I was able to work with him for the following, I guess, 11 months, 10 months, leading up to Boston, which was super cool. And it's just so special and meaningful. Just, it felt like it was meant to be. It was another gift. Like Dr. Stocks
Yeah.
was my gift, and then I get the golden bib. All of these gifts were lining up, and then Meb Keflewski comes into my life, and he was a part of my weekly life for the next 10 months. We
Wow.
would talk, pretty much every week for 30, 40 minutes on like a Zoom call. And his goal for me was we got to know each other. He wasn't just my coach anymore. We got to know each other like on a friend level. He knew my kids and Ben from the Zoom calls. But yeah, his goal was to get me back to Boston, um, but not push it too hard. His goal was to get me to that start line healthy. His quote
Hmm.
is, he wanted me medium rare. He wanted me undercooked because
Yeah.
that he's like, the story isn't you getting some big fast time right now. The story is, we're getting you to the start line healthy. This is your victory lap. And I want you medium rare, undercooked. So he was very cautious and conservative with my training plan, because like I said, this was all uncharted territory. As far as I know, nobody had ever done this. We were just being careful. I didn't know if my
Hmm.
body could handle it, but ultimately he got me there in one piece, healthy, and
Yeah.
got me to the start line.
Yeah, I can only imagine like such a because Meb just such a legend within marathon running, especially like in the US and with Boston Marathon and having him coaching you. If you were
Right.
to like very quickly in say 60 seconds describe Meb as a coach, what would you say?
Reliable, honest, genuine, everything you would probably predict or everything you see. He's some people have a certain personality in the media or maybe on social media, and they're different in real life. What you see is what you get with Meb. Have so much respect for him just as a runner, but as a coach and a person. He keeps his word. He's reliable. I mean, he has to juggle so much. He has his own kids and family, so many commitments, but he would always make sure, like, like at Boston, for example, he was calling me leading up to Boston that week. He makes his athletes a priority and truly cares about them. He doesn't take on a lot of them, but he has so many things, as you know, that he's juggling, and commitments. but he makes his athletes, he genuinely cares about them and makes them a priority. But yeah, I would say he was just a great mentor. And he helped me remember to keep the big picture in mind about getting there healthy and not pushing it too much, and just gave me a lot of he gave me a lot of great advice that also kind of applies to life. And it's just he's very level-headed. What you see is what you get with Meb. He's the real deal. Just a class act guy, reliable, honest, genuine, truly cares about his people, the people in his life and his athletes. um Fast forward back, we're going back to Boston. He happened to be on the broadcast, as you probably know, in April, the same year I was running
Hmm.
it, which was cool. That was another special gift. And he was able at the finish line. He and his brother Howie were there waiting for me, and he gave me my medal when I
Oh, that's
crossed
awesome.
the finish. 'Cause it was so emotional and special, and I was just like, I don't know, and my doctor was there. That was another
Oh
part, I
yeah.
don't wanna get off, we can talk about that, but yeah, and then Mev and I actually then to add, that was just amazing, to have Mev there waiting for me after all we had been through together. We did it. It was both of us. We were a team. Uh then we, went up to the ESPN booth, like, on the photo bridge, and we got to do an interview together, on the live broadcast on ESPN, or, up on the photo bridge together, which was super fun. Super cool. Like a once in a
Oh,
lifetime
wow.
opportunity.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. And now we are like on our timeline here. We're in Boston, but if you were to like quickly also take us through that time from saying yes to this golden ticket or golden bib in Boston, because then you've been running, like you said, you've been feeling good for that Houston half marathon, and you were in training. How did all of that, like spring, summer, fall, winter, go with Meb as a coach? Can you say something about what that was like? And I assume that you had a lot of progress throughout those months.
Are you talking about when I started working with them those 10 months leading up to Boston?
Yeah, so like
Yes.
from when you were asked, or when you were
Yes.
asked if you wanted that bib to
Right.
Boston
Yeah.
2025.
So we had about 10 months. I mean, it wasn't linear because there were things that came up. For example, a hurricane hit in Houston and we lost power for like, I don't even know, but like things came up. So my training wasn't all life happens, wasn't always linear and sickness. But his main advice for me when we would talk is he said, don't chase the fitness. Let the fitness come to you. He was very level-headed and saw the big picture, and that was his main quote, "Let the fitness come to you." So yeah, he would set me goals for, long runs and for some workouts, but he wasn't aggressive. He knew he wanted me to, he wanted it to gradually come back to me where it felt natural and that I wasn't putting myself at risk for an injury.
Mhm.
But yeah, I made a lot of progress. I remember when I ran my first 16 miler because once you get past 16 in marathon training, those are the big, the big dogs.
Yeah.
16, 18. And I didn't know, I hadn't done that in 7 years. So when I got to my first 16 miler, we had like a little party on our Zoom call, the Sweet 16 party. And,
Love
so
that.
it was fun, like, every milestone we celebrated together. 16, 18, 20 was huge. I remember doing 21 or 22, 21 probably as we got closer to Boston. It was a Saturday morning, and he called me. I think he was leaving his run or the gym, and he was, "Hey, my bionic girl." I don't know what he called me, but he was so happy for me, and, it was just such a win for both of us. He was a part of it all, and so, yeah, he got to see me, achieve we got to achieve those milestones together along the way, and he made sure that he did it in like I said, a conservative way where I wasn't rushing anything, and I was
Mhm.
able to get a solid base and gradually up my mileage and then also my speed workouts, to
And
get
how
there.
how was it? And how was it for you with your hips and all of that? Like that year, was it pretty smooth? Like you were saying, you were telling me earlier that you still have some pain every now and then, but like
Right.
it's fairly okay. Was that also the case throughout that year?
I mean, because I was doing PT, everything, I was all the ancillary, work, and we were building in such a conservative way. I didn't, aside from that cranky little hip flexor, no, I didn't have any pain or injuries. Oh, I did have one, but it has nothing to do really with like a real type of injury. I remember 3 days. I ran the Houston half marathon again that January. Before Boston, January 2025, last year. I ran the Houston half, and Meb was coaching me, and 3 day. I had
Sorry,
blisters.
I'm just gonna stop you. The audio. It seems like I don't know if the internet connection
Is it
got really
mine?
bad for a second there.
It might be mine.
Um, yeah, let's just wait it out for a couple of seconds and see.
And you can edit some of this stuff, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's not a problem
I
at
would
all.
probably talk about the Johnson& and Johnson. I would edit the part, just talk about the stem. I don't know what the right if I use the right word with the cup.
Yeah, I can look at that
Okay,
after.
okay,
Let's just first see if we can get you back to proper quality here, because it
okay.
now it sounds a bit robotic, where I can
You want me
barely
to
hear what you're
sign
saying.
out?
No, now it's good again. I
That's good.
think. Yeah, there we are.
Okay,
We're good.
so
Yeah.
we're good. So, did I have any injuries during that 10-month period? No, nothing major because I was doing all the work on the side, like the PT, the strength work, and taking extra rest days when needed. And he made sure to we w give me a conservative plan. We weren't ramping up my mileage too soon. We were like he said, the fit he was we were doing it in a way where the fitness was gradually coming back to me. Now, did my right hip flexor still get a little cranky from time to time? Sure, but I don't it still gets cranky if I'm not running an 18 miler. But, yeah, the only injury, quote unquote, that I had that we kinda had a laugh about was so, last year in January of 2025, he was coaching me. I ran the Houston half marathon leading up to that, Boston in a few months after that. And 3 days before the half marathon, I had some blisters on my toe, like a blood blisters, and I went to the podiatrist because I was very painful. Well, big mistake, huge, like they say in Pretty Woman. She took my whole entire toenail off and somehow thought that this was a good idea 3 days before my half marathon. So they put up the little curtain. I mean, I'm kinda scared of podiatrists now. I hope she's not listening to this. But she removed my entire toenail before it was ready to fall off. She numbed it, but by the time that numbing medicine went off, it was all wrapped up. It was so painful. I think the pain might have been just as bad as my hip replacement pain. I remembered,
Oof.
like, breathing like I was having like, going through contractions that toe. We underestimate the toenail pain. So, I had to soak it, and I think I was like, "There's no way how am I gonna run this half marathon in a couple days?" And, anyway, I wasn't even able to get a shoe on. So, I ordered, another pair of shoes that was, like, a size and a half bigger and just, like, sprayed all this stuff on my toe. Like, Meb the night before was like, I had a couple glasses of wine the night before the race because the pain in my toe was so bad. I didn't know if I was gonna be able to get my shoe on. So I asked Meb, we were on like a call that night, and I was like, "Are you more worried that I'm drinking wine the night before my race, or are you more worried about my toe?" He goes, "I'm more worried about your toe." But long story short, or short story long, I ended up running the race. And the toe was fine during the race in my big old clunky shoes with my all the bandages on it, but it wasn't pretty after. But I got a 1:45 in that race. It wasn't my best race, but we
Oh.
did it and I finished and the toe didn't hurt during it. But I would highly recommend never getting your toenail removed unless you absolutely have to, especially if you have a
Oh.
gold race coming up. Like she was
Yeah,
like,
it
"Oh, you'll
sounds
be fine.
awful.
You'll be fine in a few days." No. It was very painful. I will never do that again. Do not
Wow.
recommend that. Yeah, but I made it and the
Wow.
toenail grew back.
Yeah, nice. So
Yeah.
you now have two hip replacements and a new toenail, so that's great.
Yes. Yes. I've lost more toenails since, but they came off on their own. She had to
Yeah.
force it off. Anyway, yeah, I don't recommend that.
No. Okay, we need to get to like where we are today too, because there were
Okay.
things big things that happened this year. But I want us to just quickly touch on Boston 2025. You touched
Okay.
on like that special moment of finishing, so we
Right.
got that. But my first thought when I hear that someone with hip replacements ran Boston is that Boston does not seem to be a very kind course on the hips because there's so much downhill running. And I don't know how it is to go uphill, but I would just assume that going downhill, especially that first section, is pretty hard on the hips because it's hard on everything when we are running without hip replacements.
Yeah, Boston, I will say when I ran it in 2015, granted I was fitter, it was a lot harder this time around. You gotta respect the Boston course, as you know. My hips were fine during it. What I remember though, once I got to those Newton Hills, I remember at mile 20 or 21 on Heartbreak Hill, my family and friends were there, and I looked at him and I go, "Never again." Like, I was just like, "I am never doing." I was like, I had forgotten how, like, how the pain is, the pain is at mile 20, 21 in a marathon. I mean, I made it, but I remember specifically we have a video of me going, "Never again" to them. I was ready for it to be done, but no, my hips felt fine. I was just miserable by the time I was doing those hills, and I would definitely was not that miserable when I had done it, 12 year or 10 years ago. I had done it 10 years ago.
Hmm.
2015 to 2025. Yeah, my hips were fine,
Wow.
knock on wood.
It's No, it's amazing to hear, and I guess like you proved that this year because you and I started talking in, I think it was November,
Mhm. Yeah,
2025, A- and at that time, you were saying that you had a goal race. I don't remember if something was pushed back, but anyways, you had a goal race where you were gonna try to qualify for Boston, and it ended up going very well. Why don't you take us through the
yeah,
race? Was it in January that you did that?
yes, Houston. Yes,
Yeah.
so we ran Boston, and I just wanna add in this part too about about my hero, the hero of the story, Doctor Stocks. He rearranged his entire surgery schedule and flew to Boston to be there for me. He's amazing. He brought his
Wow.
son. He
Yeah.
wore those little Bionic Babe, Runner Babe sweatshirts. Oh, he goes above and beyond. Okay, so after Boston, I took a lot of time off that summer, and I started, building up my mileage again gradually in the fall. Actually, I started working with Jeff Cunningham. I wasn't working the year that I worked with Meb, or the 10 months that was ending after Boston.
Hmm.
And so I hired Jeff to help me for 4 or 5 months just get to Houston, and my goal was to Boston qualify and, set a world record for the fastest marathon with bilateral hip replacements. So yeah, I fast forward this a month ago, a little over a month ago, I ran the Houston Marathon, and I did it. I qualified for Boston. I had like a 2.5 minute buffer, which isn't huge, and I set the world record. We're currently in the process right now of there was a lot of paperwork involved with that, like hours, and so all of that is submitted, and it takes a little while for them to review it all and approve it. Like, we're talking witness statements, videos, photos, a race director statement. Like, it's a lot because they want to make
Hmm.
sure it is legit. So as soon as that gets officially approved, I guess they send you a certificate. I'm not sure, but yeah, I mean, assuming everything goes through, I set that record. I mean, there's not a lot of
And what
competition.
is that world record at the time now? Then
Well,
with your time.
there wasn't an official one. It said less than 6 hours. I don't think
Yes.
there was
So I
one.
guess my question is, how fast did you run? Because I'm sure the listeners are very curious to hear
Oh,
how fast you were able to run
it
with the hip replacement
3:42.
here.
3:42.
Wow.
I was shooting for faster, like we all are, but, I'll take it. It was a great day. Overall, I felt really good. I'm still getting used to this marathon distance, but yeah, I qualified for Boston. I set that record, and hopefully everything gets approved, in the next couple of months, hopefully sooner. And, it was just a fun goal. It was a fun goal to do, and, I mean, my kids are so excited, especially my son, because he wants my name to be in that book, and he wants the certificate.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Wow.
that was last
So,
month.
so yeah, and what does that do to your ambitions now? Because now you are, if we kind of look back at where you were before the surgery, you really just wanted to run, and you were definitely running, like running as fast as that in a marathon. That's more than just running, right? But do you still have like higher or greater ambitions with your running now going forward? Obviously, or hopefully you'll be able to go to Boston then in
Right.
2027, I
That's the
guess.
plan. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's the plan.
But
Yeah, so I took a lot of extra time off. I think I took 10 to 14 days off after Houston. I felt fine after a day. Hips were fine. I felt great. But mentally, I just I wanted I just mentally and emotionally, I think I just needed some lazy time, some time to myself to just not run if I didn't feel like it. Lay, eat all the snacks, take naps, lay on the couch, go see friends, do everything that I normally, what that normally wasn't a priority. So over the last month I've taken a lot of time off and I'm just now starting back again. I feel like I've lost a little bit of fitness, but I think it was really important for me at least to have that mental and emotional break because I didn't want to jump back into another build if I wasn't really wanting it. And now that I've
mhm.
had all that time on the couch, I was obsessively trying to find Nancy Guthrie last week. You
Yeah.
know the
Yeah,
story? Yeah.
I was
I've been
following that on your
oh,
Instagram. I've been following that too, but
oh,
yeah,
I've
it's
been
awful.
obsessed. My friends and I are on
Yeah.
a group chat, like, I was locked in, like, to the point where I was losing sleep. I was emotionally invested, and so that took precedence over my running last week, but now that I have had all that extra time off, I feel excited and ready to build back up, and like I said, I wanted to get to the point where I wanted to want it, not,
Mhm.
"Alright, this is what I'm supposed to do, let me start building," and I'm
Yeah.
there,
Yeah.
and I'm excited. I mean, I feel like I lost a little bit of fitness in the last month, but my body's healthy, I feel refreshed, hopefully I'll get it back in the next month, and then my goal is to start, chipping away and
Yeah.
hopefully get back closer to my old times. I may not, but just see what these new hips can do and figure
But
out
is that a dream goal of yours to kind of just be able to run even faster than your 309 at some point?
I mean, I'm 10 years older now. Yes, Jeff actually told me, Jeff Cunningham,
Yeah.
he was like, yeah, he's re he gave me a lot of confidence. He was like, "Carrie, we're getting you back, like, you're gonna be s" he was giving me times like, "No, you're gonna get it. I think you can go sub 3." And I'm like, "Oh, I don't know, I'm old
I
now,"
love
but
that.
he was getting I love the thing about Jeff is that he got me excited for shooting for big goals.
Mhm.
He was pretty confident that I can get back to that. I'm not sure, but I'm willing to test it out and try and see if I can get back, to start small, get down to 330s, then through break 330 and down to 315 and maybe get closer to 310, 305. We'll see. But I am 44 right now. So
Yeah.
I don't know.
Oh,
We'll
age
see.
is just a number, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, and these hips, I
I
mean,
mean, you've proven much more than like the impossible is possible with what you've gone through than age. So I
right.
don't think age is your biggest challenge. That is you've you've had your biggest challenge, so now
I,
everything is kind of just fun going forward.
yeah, I think you're right about that. I think it did, you puts things into perspective. And I will say, going through the whole hip recovery, the hip diagnosis and getting to the surgeries and recovering, but then also that toenail was pretty intense too.
Yeah,
That toenail that I got ripped
right.
off, but I think yeah, I don't know, it'll be fun to see, like, there's no pressure. I mean, I of course, I
No.
put a little pressure on myself, but there's no pressure. I think the second chapter's fun, like, it made me just realize and appreciate what a gift running is and just being able to get back out there. But
Mhm.
yeah, I mean, I would be fun to see if I can chip away at my times and go run some more, maybe I'll do a fall marathon. I'm trying to figure that out, and then I signed up for Houston again for 2027, and then hopefully I'll go to Boston. That's the plan for,
Yeah.
next April and see. And then I get to meet you
Yeah.
there.
Yeah, that
Hopefully
would
I'll
be
get to meet you
great.
there. Yeah.
Yeah. A- And like, first of all, I think that things are possible. I think that you've proven that. But lastly, in this episode, I think that one of the things that I really loved about that, I keep referring to this article. I'll link it down in the show notes. But one of the things that I loved with the ending of that article was when I think you were asked something about your message, or at least you were saying something about what you wanted to kind of prove or show or tell your kids
Right.
by doing this. And I would love for you to kind of just repeat that, whether it's just the same or at least like that message that you had for your
Right.
kids.
For my kids and really for anybody out there, we all go through setbacks. Life throws us curveballs. We get knocked down. It's not fun, but um, Yeah, I like the best thing that's come out of this. I got my confidence and I got that part of my soul back, and I've gotten to reclaim that part of my soul. But I love that my kids saw me at my rock bottom. They were terrified. I didn't talk about that, but they were 4 and 6 at the time, and they went from seeing their mom going normal
Hmm.
day to day life, going to using a walker, getting around. It scared them, and I remember my son crying. But yeah, they saw me at my lowest, and then I think it's just something they'll carry with them the rest of their life. The fact that they saw me come back and fight
Yeah.
back and then come to my marathons. They came to Boston, they saw me at Houston, and uh I want to show them and show everybody else that, we're all going to get knocked down. I'll probably have more curveballs thrown at me, but it's really important to just get back up, and take it day by day and follow your dreams in your heart. And the big thing I say is you just never know what's around the corner. You may think you're like at rock bottom, which you may very well may be, but your best days could be around the corner if you just stick with it and take things a day at a time. I mean, I never in my wildest dreams would have thought that I would be here now, when I was in that dark year or two of my life
Hmm.
when I was uncertain of the future, and I thought I had lost that part of myself. So yeah, I think it's a great lesson for my kids and for everybody. It's bigger than my
Yeah.
running, it's bigger than the world record, it's bigger than my hips.
Yeah.
It just shows us
Exactly.
all that just keep going.
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that. And now they should add that option, or when they have that form before going to surgery, play with your grandkids, gardening, run a
Boston.
marathon. Yeah.
Yes,
Okay.
that should be it. Yes, 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 and now I will say too, circling back to our conversation earlier about doctors, now doctors are starting to come around and get on the same page as Dr. Stocks. So,
Yeah.
I have a lot of people I've gotten to meet a lot of people from my story who are going through hip replacements or who have had them, runners, younger people, older people, and they're now going to their doctors with my story. And a lot
Hmm.
more doctors now are starting to give their patients the green light to go after their dreams or, their goals, whether that's running or something else. They're not as quick to dismiss that because they see that the technology is really good, and they're hearing about stories of patients, able to sort of defy those odds.
Hmm.
I'm one of the guinea pigs.
Yeah, but it's great. Like this, I feel like we're ending this episode on like a very positive note, obviously because of you, but also what you're saying now. Like it gives hope and optimism for anyone, and I hope that this episode also serves as that for anyone like facing obviously what you were facing, but also anything like it, or anything like where they've been told that things are impossible, to at least believe in it and have that hope, and also maybe look for that second, third, 10th opinion, whatever it is,
Yes.
on some of those things, because there are so many things that are possible today that weren't possible just 5 years ago or 10 years ago, or, so it's yeah, I love that, and I really appreciate your time, Carrie, and everything that you shared, and I can't wait to keep following you and see where you'll end up, and I hope to see you in Boston next year.
Oh, thank you so much, Christian. No, you asked great questions. I love getting to share it all with you. And yeah, I'm excited to keep in touch. And yeah, let's make that our goal. We'll meet in Boston.
Yes, we will.
2027.
Thank you.
And good luck with your Boston this year in a couple months.
Thank you. Yeah, that'll be fun.
Yeah, I'm excited for you. But yeah, thank you again for having me and for wanting to share my story.
Of course, thank you. Thanks again, Carrie, for sharing all the things that you did. I'm so inspired by you, and I can't wait to see where you'll end up. I think that it's so cool that you're sharing your story, but also that you're just pursuing this running, um, although you are facing challenges that most of us can't even comprehend. If things go according to plan, Ethan Shuley will be on for the next episode. And I realized that he's probably been on somewhere between 5 and 10 podcasts since he ran a 2:07 in Osaka. But I'm super excited to talk to him still, to ask him about his training, his running, and hopefully that episode will be something that can still feel a little bit different than the other podcasts that he's been on. Super excited to share that one. And yeah, enjoy the rest of the week. Enjoy your runs. I hope that you are having progress, that you're feeling good. And yeah, with that, thanks for listening. Thanks for listening to the Marathon Podcast. Appreciate you. You listen to the Marathon Podcast, brought to you by Wallet Studio.